How's everyone doing? Thanks for joining me on my small engine repair channel. Today's project is on this Poulan 6 horsepower 24-inch 2-stage snowblower, and I just picked it up. I paid $50 for it, and the guy said that it's been sitting for some time, and they can't get it started. So we're going to take a look at it and see if we can't get it back in service. Alright guys, so I'm kind of doing a once over on this thing. I did pay $50 for it. You can see it did come with some parts that have been taken off, so somebody has been messing around with this thing. The primer hose is off, the primer bulb is missing, the choke lever looks like it has a missing handle on it. Potentially the key has been taken out. There's a bunch of wires kind of hanging down here, so usually that's for ignition system, to kill the ignition system. But it's also missing a starter recoil. So and this thing does not have electric start that I can see. So that is going to be a problem. Obviously, we're going to need to source one of those. I did look online in Canada. It'd be about $85 to try and ship one here to Canada. Anyways, inside the fuel tank here is empty. He said he drained the fuel for the transportation, so I appreciated that. But when I smelled inside of the tank, it definitely smells like Varsol. So that tank will need to be cleaned out because there's debris in there, first of all. Oil, that's not a good sign. Very little oil on the end of that dipstick. I would say it's pretty much none, which is never a good sign, because where did the oil go? There is another dipstick here. Okay, well, this is obviously missing the bolts, the retaining bolts to keep the belt cover on. Let's see if I can get this chute to move. So at least the chute control moves. Check the condition of the belts. So with as much rust that there is on this pulley, that doesn't bode too well. So it's obviously stored outside. There's a bunch of crap and leaves and stuff down there, and maybe some nests or something. All right, I did check to make sure that the engine had compression and it wasn't locked up. So there is the compression stroke there. So it's definitely got some compression. Let's see what this oil dipstick tells us. Once again, it is very low on the oil. It doesn't anymore. So I'm definitely going to put some oil in this thing before I try and fire things up. He said that when he had the fuel valve turned on, which is there, that it was leaking fuel all over the place. So that's why he drained it out for me. So first things first, I mean, they were obviously in here. There's a couple of bolts that are loose here. I'm going to try and is missing a bolt back there. So this might end up being a parts machine. I don't want to spend $85 on the starter recoil if I can't even get this thing running. So I think what I'm going to do, get started here, is get access to the carburetor so I can maybe spray some carb spray, see if it has any spark and compression. Alright, so I got the cover off of there. It was just this one back 10mm bolt and then 2 bolts that attached here to the carb area. And then just had to lift it up and over. So you can see there's some wiring here for this shutoff switch that isn't attached. I suppose this probably attaches to the kill for the key. And then the one wire here. Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out all this wiring, because I'll be honest with you, normally you don't have this, whatever this guy is here. So I'm not overly familiar with that, so I'll take a look at that a little closer. This, though, might prevent us from having spark if there isn't a connection here. So we're going to have to try and figure this out probably sooner than later. All right, so the carburetor itself, the choke mechanism works, so that's good. And spark plug is attached. It is a LCT engine, which is the new Tecumseh engines. LCT bought Tecumseh, liquid cooled technology. So, all right, I think what we're gonna do then is I'm gonna make sure the throttle is not seized. The throttle looks like it's in good shape. So what I'm gonna do is spray some carb spray or ether in there. And we're going to try and figure out if we have spark and compression, because if it starts and runs on the ether, then we're going to assume that we've got some carb issues. All right, so what I'm going to do next is I put a little bit of oil in there, just so if it does start up, it has some lubrication. I'm spraying some quick start in the carburetor itself. And I've got a drill with a 19mm that I'm just going to turn the engine over with. And we'll see if it will even kind of spark up and try and run a little bit. Okay, well, that's promising. That's exactly what we expected it to do. And so that is good. So it does have spark, even though none of these wires are attached. These are attached for the kill part of the system. So if I do get this thing running, I'm going to have to get these wires, figure out how to attach them together. Just trying to find some videos. I've never worked on one of these LCTs. I think one of these go together, and I think one of these wires go to the wire here. So I just got to figure out if it makes a difference which one is attached to what here. So I'm going to do a little more research on that. But in the meantime, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get cracking on this carburetor, because I can guarantee you it's all gummed up, and we'll have to see if it's even salvageable. Alright guys, to get this carb off then, what you're going to need to do is take off these 2 retaining bolts here, 10mm. Then this bracket's going to slide right off. There's 2 lock washers here. And then of course you'd have to take off your fuel line. Just get a pair of pliers, move that clamp up, and then pull that fuel line off of the inlet for the carburetor. Next thing is you can start pulling it out a little bit. There is a spring and a throttle rod right here. So this spring just kind of tilt it upwards, take that spring out. And then for the throttle knob, so with the carburetor partially pulled out, you got to kind of find the sweet spot. When you fully open that carburetor or the throttle, this rod should just pop out of its spot there. Okay, and then we get our carburetor off. All right, so first thing I want to do is try and drain the fuel out of this thing. So this looks like a 10 mil bolt on the bottom side here. And there's a bunch of crud kind of coming off of this from the exterior. Just taking the bowl nut off. I'm interested to see if there's any fuel left in this, what it looks like. So there definitely is some fuel left. The inside of the bowl doesn't look too bad, actually. The fuel smells real bad, though. That was mostly outside debris from the outside of it. So I'm just going to quickly just put the bowl back on so I don't get any debris back on the inside of it. And I'm going to try and use that little bit of fuel to kind of clean out the outside of this carburetor before I put it in my ultrasonic cleaner. Try and get as much of this gunk and debris off as I can. Use a little bit of this old gasoline as well. So, you know, actually pretty good. And if you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, which most of you probably will not, which is perfectly fine, you're still going to want to do this. If you have some sort of compressed air, it would be really nice, like a compressor. Just after you do this, just kind of blow all this off. And if you don't, well, you just make do with what you got. Okay, so you can see it kind of starting to look a little better. All right, and then what I'm going to do next is pressure test the needle and seat just to see if I have any issues there. Hook up my Mighty Vac pressure tester to the fuel inlet with the carburetor in the upside down position. And what I'm going to do is try and pressurize this to about 5 psi and see if it holds the pressure. If it doesn't, that means that the needle valve, you can see there, it's not holding the pressure. The needle valve is not sealing properly. So that's going to cause flooding of your carburetor. And depending on how this is set up, it would leak into your oil system, into your crankcase, or it would leak out the front of your carburetor. So this needle and seat needs some work. So now I can start taking this apart. I think I'm going to wipe this off a little bit first. All right, I'm going to take the primer line off. All right, so the needle valve is right here. It's it's attached underneath this float. So I'll take the float pin out, and I'll take the float and the needle valve itself out. Now, I usually shake the float to see if it's leaking or accepting any gasoline, which would cause it to not float properly. And then I usually check the condition of the needle part of the needle and seat. You can see where that rubber tip is. And you check for any deformation or any sort of ring, and it doesn't look too bad. So honestly, I'm not entirely sure why this needle valve is not seating properly. So it's going to seat down here, right in this brass seat right there. There's a little bit of debris, hair or something, but it sits down right there and it plugs off the fuel. The fuel comes in from the fuel inlet, okay, through this little tube and comes out through that needle valve. And if that needle valve's not seating properly on this seat, it's not going to stop the fuel. So anyways, we're going to continue to take this apart. Next thing we need is a flathead screwdriver that'll fit down in where that main jet is. And just make sure you're pushing down as you're turning so that you don't strip the head of that flathead. And it doesn't spin all the way out. You can see it's no longer coming out any further. So at that point, just try and shake it and get that main jet out. And the main jet's got a sized hole down the center of it, and you can see there that's actually very clear. If your machine was not running or was surging, that means that that hole probably is gunked up a little bit, that little jet. Also inside there is an emulsion tube. I don't know if you can see that down in there, but that little brass piece of tubing right at the end of my finger, that is an emulsion tube. That should be coming out as well. If it doesn't come out, try and stick my screwdriver down in there to help it. Kind of shake it a little bit, and if that still doesn't work, then you kind of have to get a something like a little Allen wrench, something like this guy, and stick it down from the top side and try and push that through. There, it shoots out the bottom. And this emulsion tube has got a bunch of little holes in it as well. You can see them there. Now you're going to want to make sure all of those little holes are cleared out. So you can spray some carb spray. You can use a little piece of a wire to put through each of those little holes. This is just like a bread tie. Stick them through all these little holes. Just make sure that they're all cleared out. Alright, so I'm going to put this in my ultrasonic cleaner so I don't really need to worry too much. They do look pretty clean, but there's also a hole that goes straight through, a big hole. That one typically does not get gummed up. You can see it goes right straight through there. It's a bigger sized hole, so it doesn't get gummed up as easy. Then the next thing I'm going to do is take out this idle circuit. So this is an idle screw, set screw, that kind of sets the speed of the idle, like throttle at low idle. The only thing you really want to note with this thing is that the idle screw sits halfway across this idle jet. So when we put it back together, we're just going to screw it in until it looks just like that again, where it's halfway across that idle jet, which is hidden underneath this idle screw. I'm going to show you here in just a second. Okay, and then just to pop out this idle jet, you just stick your flathead underneath one of the sides and it comes right out. Okay, now if it's surging, this is usually a main culprit as well, because there's such a small tiny little hole at the end of this thing, like where that brass jet is. It's not going to focus probably here, but there we go. You probably can't even see that hole. It's so tiny you can't even get a bread tie in it. You have to use like a piece of wire from like an electrical cord, or a piece of wire from a wire brush, which is what this is, and you stick it in that little jet. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's going through. A lot of times I find this clogged up, and it will make your machine not run properly. So all right, so going into my ultrasonic cleaner, everything minus the plastic parts or rubber parts. So I will take this bowl gasket off. Hopefully it's still in half decent shape. It does look a little crusty. Now, if you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, the other thing you could maybe do is stick a Q-tip down here with, you know, some toothpaste or something that has a little bit of an abrasion, and run that down in there. You can even put it in the end of a drill. That kind of helps out. So that's it. It's all taken apart now. And I'm going to put all the metal parts in the bowl here that I want to get cleaned out. And I'm going to put this in my ultrasonic cleaner for 15 minutes or so. Then I'll come back and we'll put it back together and put it back on the machine. So it's all out of the ultrasonic cleaner again. And I just want to show you here. Putting it back together is just the reverse of how we took it apart. But before putting the needle and seat back together, I did put a little bit of this 3-in-1. It's really thin oil. A couple drops in where the seat goes, that brass seat. And I'm going to pressure test it again here to about 5 psi. And you can see that it's definitely holding now, unlike it was before. So the other way, if you want to test it, is you could just blow inside. You can blow with your mouth in here, and if you hear any air escaping, then you know the needle is not seating properly. So just about ready to put this thing back on. And then I'm going to tackle the fuel tank next. All right. She's good to go back on the machine now. All right, so next, if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and empty out all the old fuel out of your fuel tank, and we're going to try and clean it out as best we can. And so the previous owner did say that he did do this already, so that helps me out a little bit. You can see there's a little bit of residual left in here. Yeah, I would always recommend cleaning out your fuel tank if you're going to clean out your carburetor, because it doesn't make sense to, put bad fuel back into your nice clean carburetor. So I think what I'm going to do here is spray some compressed air inside that tank, and so there is still a little bit left in the tank there. I want to try and catch this. I don't want it to go on my floor, but unfortunately there's no real easy way to do that. So what I think I'm going to do is, for now, I'm going to shut off this fuel, and then just focus my attention inside this tank here. Now, if yours is really bad, you might have to take it right off the machine and work on it like that. But this tank is actually not too bad, actually. So that tank's good. And now we're going to go ahead and put the carburetor back on this machine and put some fresh gas in it. See how we did. So before you get it on all the way, just remember you got to put this throttle linkage back in. And again, you got to kind of find the sweet spot. You might have to, bend the rod just a little bit, but you get it started in there. Goes in from the top. I know I'm probably right in your way, but you'll know exactly what I mean. I'm trying to do this without being in your way. I'm putting that little spring back on there now. And I'm just going to slide it in all the way. Put my fuel line back on. Yeah, so you put the bracket back on and got your 2 lock washers that go on. And then just put your 2 10mm retaining nuts on each side. I put in by hand so I don't over tighten. All right, so we're ready to put some fuel in here. Try and start this thing up. Now it won't have a shut off, so I'll have to shut it off by just choking it and making sure there's no air getting in there, and then the engine will shut off. But yeah, it should be able to run now. And what I'll do is just do a function test of all the other options on this thing. Make sure it drives back and forward. Make sure the augers spin properly. So let's put this on the ground and see if we can't get this thing fired up. All right, so I just put some fresh non-ethanol fuel in the gas tank. The previous owner said that when it had gas in it, it would leak out through the carburetor. And I don't see any fuel. I'm going to give it a little bit of quick start just to help it along. Kind of like a primer, and then I'll choke it. And we'll have to start it with the drill again. We'll see what happens. Alright, so it started, it just didn't stay running. Actually, I didn't open the fuel valve, so I'm going to open the fuel valve. I'm going to have to wait a minute or two here for let the float bowl fill up, see if it leaks. Alright, looks pretty dry. Let's try this again. All right, so it's in good running shape. I think the augers were turning, but it was hard for me to see from my perspective. So I'll check the footage. Hopefully that'll show whether or not it was working or not. But yeah, this one looks like it's going to be a survivor. So I did notice a couple small other things, that the chute deflector doesn't go up and down, and that there is a, I don't want to turn this too much, but there is a flat spot on this one pulley here. It didn't seem to affect the operation. Of course, I'm going to take the bottom belly pan off and check all the transmission and everything from the bottom side there. It does look, though, like this top oil cap is not sealing properly. Because it is definitely leaking oil, and maybe that's why there was so little oil. So I'm gonna have to figure out why that cap is not sealing properly here. But anyways, that's it for today. I'm gonna leave this for today, and I'm gonna come back to it tomorrow. Today happens to be the Team Canada gold medal game for the World Juniors, so won't be working on it tonight. But I'll try and get back at it tomorrow. Alright, so it's the next day, guys. Yesterday we finished off by getting the engine running and function testing the augers and the drive system, and everything seems to be working okay there. Of course, we couldn't shut it down because we had no wiring to be able to ground the system out. I did try and do some research yesterday on these LCT engines, but they are still fairly new. I don't know a whole lot about them, and there's not a whole lot out on the internet about them, to be honest with you, because I've spent hours kind of researching this, try to figure out how this wiring is supposed to be hooked up. There's a couple of definitives that I do know. This wire here actually comes from the coil. So this box must get some sort of an input to be able to ground out the coil through this wire. Now, there are two ground wires as well that are attached to this assembly. This white wire actually is, I don't know if you'll see it, but it's hooked up to a bolt up and underneath here that is actually grounding out this wire. This green wire is also hooked up to that same bolt. So these two are definitely hooked up to ground. These two items, I don't know. I presume one of them gets hooked up to this wire, which is part of this harness that should be attached to both the kill switch here for ignition and the key. These two butt connectors look like they go on these two prongs right here for the kill switch, or for the key switch, I should say. So I'm going to hook those up like so. And I don't think those matter which one goes where, but those are both connected. So, and those also get connected over here to this. So this is all interconnected. Now, if either this gets switched off or this key gets pulled out, that should send some sort of a signal, I guess, or disconnect the circuit coming off of this wire that's got to connect to one of these black wires. As of to know which one it is, I don't know. And then you got this extra ground wire that somebody obviously has the connector there. When they pulled out the connector, it obviously was stuck or rusted it together. So what I believe is the case is one of these is connected to one of these wires, and this guy off this harness is connected to the other one. The problem is I have no idea, because there is, again, no literature that I found or videos that actually show this wiring kind of loose like this. All of the stuff that I've been able to see kind of have all of these wires kind of neatly tied up with a zip tie, but you can't tell what one goes with what. So I'm just guessing, you know, which wires go to what. So, I mean, this one comes back this way. If you, like just the way it's bent and crimped, it comes back this way, which kind of jives, I think, with how this is set up, because this kind of sits on like so. This wire from this guy has got to hook in, and I would suspect, just from the way this wiring is kind of kinked, that this harness is going to hook into here, and this guy must somehow hook into this one for a ground. But again, I'm taking a shot in the dark here. If anybody has any literature or good, you know, resources for parts diagrams, wiring, anything to do with these LCT engines, please go ahead and leave a comment in the section down below to help us all out in the community. So anyways, what I'm going to do is probably try and start this thing up and go ahead and hook up this wiring the best way, and I think I know the best way that I believe it goes together, and then just start testing the kill switches and see if I can't find one combination of these wires that actually is going to work. All right, so just give you one last quick update on this Poulan snowblower. I did, what I ended up doing here with this wiring is I ended up bypassing this key switch and just hooked up the ground capabilities to the on-off switch here. And so one of the wires that come out of the back of that switch will go directly to one of these black wires going into the CDI box. And the other wire coming out of that switch is just hooked up directly to ground. I've actually created a new ground wire, this red one, because the other one was not in good shape. So this is the one wire here coming out that goes to the ground, and this is the wire here that hooks up to one of the connectors going into the CDI box. Now, if you guys remember, there's 4 wires coming out of the CDI box, or going in, whatever you want to call it. So there's one ground wire, the green one. There's one wire that comes from the ignition coil that sends the ground to the ignition coil to shut off the engine. Then there's 2 feeds that go into the CDI box there, and they one of them comes from these 2 switches, which are actually wired in series. And the other switch, which is not being used right now, in some of my research, I believe, is from a low oil switch. So this CDI box must be from a machine compatible with a machine that has a low oil shutoff as well. Most snowblowers don't have that. Generators would be kind of the common thing that has those low oil shutoffs. So anyways, I got this thing all cleaned up, and it's been completely looked over from top to bottom, and we're just getting ready to sell it now. And I just listed it this evening. We're supposed to have some snow tomorrow, so hopefully that's going to actually drive a few sales, because I have this other big 31-inch Craftsman, and then I got this little 22-inch yard machines. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching me wrench on this guy, and hopefully you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing to my channel, because I do have lots of videos on wrenching on this sort of stuff. So, till our next project, guys, take care.